Have you ever sat quietly in your favorite chair, maybe with a warm cup of tea in hand, and found yourself wondering, why does being around certain people leave me feeling so small, so tired, or somehow less like myself? At this stage in life, many of us begin to realize something very important. Not every connection we've held on to is still good for us. Some relationships lift us, comfort us, and remind us of who we truly are. But others? They drain us. They chip away at our peace, our confidence, and sometimes even our sense of worth. And yet, because we've known these people for so long, maybe they're family or childhood friends, we hesitate. We make excuses. We tell ourselves, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this is just how it's supposed to be. But deep down, we know. We know when something no longer feels right. In today's conversation, we're going to gently, honestly, and courageously talk about the signs that it may be time to let go. Yes, even if it's someone you've known for decades. This isn't about being cold-hearted or giving up on people. It's about honoring your inner peace. It's about choosing growth, clarity, and dignity in the years ahead. Let's start by exploring something subtle, but incredibly telling. Have you ever noticed how certain people always seem to have money for the things they want, but when it comes to you, your needs, your plans, they suddenly tighten the purse strings? Maybe it's a friend who's always talking about saving money when it's your idea, but splurges on fancy dinners with others. Or a relative who conveniently forgets their wallet more times than you can count. Now, it's one thing to truly be struggling. That calls for compassion. But it's another thing entirely when someone uses money as a tool to avoid effort, commitment, or generosity, especially toward you. I remember a friend I had years ago. Every time we planned something, he'd sigh and say, "I can't really afford it right now." And I understood. At least I thought I did. Until I started noticing that he'd just bought new gadgets, gone on trips, and treated other people to meals. That's when I realized it wasn't about money, it was about value. He didn't value my time, my presence, or the friendship enough to invest in it. It hurt, but it opened my eyes. Relationships need fairness. Not 50-50 every time, but at least mutual care and consideration. If you constantly find yourself being the giver, the one who makes all the effort while the other person takes, excuses, or simply withholds, it's not just tiring. It's unbalanced. And no relationship, no matter how long it's lasted, can truly thrive in that kind of one-sided space. Now let me ask you something else. Have you ever been around someone who just can't help themselves from stirring up conflict? You're talking about something harmless, plans for the weekend, a memory from years ago, and suddenly it becomes a debate. Their tone shifts, their eyes narrow, and before you know it, you're being pulled into an argument you never asked for. Some people, unfortunately, live off drama. They turn every difference into a battleground. And worse, they often demand loyalty at your expense. Whose side are you on? They'll ask, as though relationships are a game to win rather than a space to grow. I once had a friend like this. From the outside, he was charming, confident, even fun. But if you disagreed with him about anything, he would twist it into a test. One night we were at a dinner with old friends, just chatting about a vacation idea. One tiny disagreement, and suddenly he was pressing me in front of everyone. "Tell them I'm right. You agree with me, don't you?" I froze. Not because I couldn't speak, but because I didn't want to keep playing that game. That was the moment I realized something vital. Peace is not found in proving ourselves right. It's found in walking away from battles that don't matter. People who thrive on arguments, who can't accept differences, or who pull you into their emotional storms are not just difficult, they're dangerous to your spirit. And it's not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, but just as harmful. Let's take another example. Have you ever shared something vulnerable, maybe a worry, a moment of grief, a bit of your day that felt heavy, and had it brushed aside like it was nothing? Or worse, flipped around into someone else's story, as if your pain didn't matter. It's a painful feeling to be unseen like that. I remember once opening up to a longtime friend about my mother's declining health. I wasn't looking for pity, just someone to sit with me in the heaviness of it. But instead of listening, she immediately jumped in. "Oh, you think that's bad? You should hear about my week." And just like that, I disappeared. It's in those moments that something becomes clear. Not everyone is capable of holding space for you. Not everyone has the emotional maturity or compassion to pause their own needs and truly see yours. And when a relationship is built on one person always talking, always centering their own experience, it stops being a relationship. It becomes a monologue, and you're just the audience. We can't control other people, only our response to them. And part of that wisdom means recognizing when someone isn't able or willing to meet us in mutual respect. It means stepping back, not in anger, but in understanding. Not because we've given up on kindness, but because we've chosen to give it to ourselves first. As we age, our time becomes even more precious. Every conversation, every interaction carries more weight. And that's not something to take lightly. You've earned the right to protect your peace, your energy, and your joy. You've earned the right to walk away from people who no longer walk beside you with honesty and care. So if you've been feeling uneasy around someone lately, if your heart sinks a little when their name shows up on your phone, pause. Reflect. Ask yourself this: do I feel more alive, more whole after spending time with them? Or do I feel smaller, more anxious, more lost? That answer matters. It always has. Let's keep walking this path together. There's more to uncover and more wisdom waiting just ahead. Now, let's take a moment to breathe. I want you to sit with this next thought, not with judgment, but with compassion for yourself. Think back to someone in your life who, for whatever reason, always seems to make light of your worries. You share something that's weighing on you, maybe something deeply personal or painful, and they respond with a shrug, or worse, a joke. They may say, "Oh, that's nothing. You should hear what I've been through." Or they try to fix things with dismissive advice like, "Just get over it." And when it happens, it stings. You walk away wondering if you're being too sensitive or if you should just stop sharing altogether. But the truth is, your feelings matter. They are valid. And being heard is not a luxury. It's a basic human need. I remember a man I met during a local community class. He was kind, funny, and full of life stories. But when I shared a quiet struggle I was going through, caring for a loved one in poor health, his face didn't change. He simply shifted the topic to a story about his golf game that weekend. I don't think he meant harm, but in that moment, I felt invisible. And that's the key, isn't it? Being around someone who consistently fails to acknowledge your pain, your joy, your humanness, it creates an emptiness, a one-sided silence. And over time, that silence can erode even the strongest self-esteem. You start wondering if your experiences even matter. A healthy relationship, no matter your age, is built on emotional safety. When someone makes light of your worries or sees their pain as more important than yours, it's a signal, a very clear one, that the balance is broken. That doesn't mean you stop being kind. It doesn't mean you become cold or distant. But it might mean stepping back. It might mean realizing that you can care about someone without keeping them close. And sometimes it's not even the dismissive comments that leave us hurting. Sometimes it's a look, a sigh, a sarcastic tone. And then there's the person who never says thank you, who never apologizes, who seems to take your presence for granted. You do something thoughtful, bring them a meal, offer your time, give your ear, and instead of appreciation, you get silence. Or worse, entitlement. That lack of gratitude, it eats away at the heart. When someone can't say thank you, it doesn't just reflect bad manners. It reflects a lack of recognition for your effort, your time, your care. And when apologies never come, even after they've clearly hurt you, it becomes painfully clear that they value their pride more than your peace. I once knew a woman, a neighbor actually, who had a way of making everything seem like a competition. If I mentioned something joyful, say, my grandson's recent accomplishment, she would immediately try to one-up it. Or if I shared something difficult, she would roll her eyes and change the subject. Over time, I realized she didn't celebrate with me, and she didn't sit with me in sorrow either. Her world only had room for one person, herself. And here's something I want you to hear. You deserve better. You deserve to be around people who say thank you when you do something kind, who say I'm sorry when they've made a mistake, who clap when you succeed and sit beside you when you fall. That kind of relationship doesn't require grand gestures. It lives in the little things. A warm word, a soft glance, a shared silence that says, I see you and I care. When someone can't offer those things, not once, but repeatedly, it's not unkind to walk away. It's wise. We don't control how others act, only how we choose to respond. And choosing peace, choosing to step away from those who consistently disrespect, disregard, or diminish us, that's not weakness. That's strength. That's clarity. I know that for many of us, especially as we get older, there's a temptation to hold on to every relationship simply because of history. We've known each other since high school, you might say. He's my brother. She's my oldest friend. But let me gently ask you this. Is history enough if it costs your present joy? Because here's the truth we sometimes forget. We are allowed to grow. We are allowed to change. And just as we outgrow clothes, routines, or even cities, we can outgrow relationships. That doesn't make us heartless. It makes us human. And sometimes, after we create that distance, something beautiful happens. The space we create allows for healing, reflection, and yes, even better connections to emerge. Ones where we are seen, heard, and valued, not for what we give, but for who we are. So, if any of these stories remind you of someone in your life, someone who drains your spirit, mocks your pain, or forgets your worth, I want you to know it's okay. It's okay to feel hurt. It's okay to take time. And it's absolutely okay to walk away if your heart tells you the weight is too much. Because life after 60, 70, or 80 isn't about shrinking. It's about blooming into who you've always been meant to be, fully, freely, and without apology. And that journey, it deserves quiet. It deserves light. It deserves people who protect your peace, not shatter it. Let's continue. There's more to uncover. There's something deeply powerful about realizing that not all friendships are meant to last a lifetime. Some people come into our lives to teach us lessons, to walk beside us for a season, and then life naturally takes us in different directions. And yet, when that happens, we often feel a quiet grief, a tug at the heart, as if letting go means we've failed somehow. But letting go doesn't always mean abandoning someone. Sometimes, it simply means honoring what the relationship once was, and accepting that it no longer serves who we are today. Have you ever had someone in your life who once brought you so much joy, maybe laughter that left your belly aching, memories that still make you smile, but now, when you're with them, something just feels off? You can't quite explain it. The conversation feels forced. You don't laugh like you used to. You leave feeling more alone than when you arrived. This shift doesn't always happen because of a fight or betrayal. Sometimes it happens quietly, over years. We grow. They grow. But in different ways. Our values change, our perspectives evolve, and suddenly, we find ourselves standing beside someone we barely recognize anymore. And that's okay. One man I spoke with recently told me about his best friend from high school. They were inseparable in their youth. Camping trips, late-night talks, the kind of bond that feels unbreakable. But as time passed, their lives took different paths. One moved away, built a career, raised a family. The other stayed in their hometown, lived a simpler life. When they met up decades later, it wasn't the same. The connection felt distant. They both tried to keep it alive, but the silence between conversations grew louder each time. Eventually, the man said, "I realized we were trying to keep something alive that had already ended, not out of love, but out of habit." So he chose to gently step back, not with resentment, but with gratitude for what had been. That's what real maturity looks like, not clinging to the past, but learning to carry it forward with respect, without forcing it into your present. There's a quiet dignity in releasing people who no longer fit in your life. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and even for them is to walk away. Now, I want to ask you something that might feel uncomfortable, but I ask it with care. Have you ever found yourself playing the role of an emotional dumping ground? You know what I mean. A person in your life, maybe a friend, a sibling, even a neighbor, calls or drops by, and every conversation revolves around their problems, their complaints, their pain. And you listen, again and again. You try to help. You offer advice. You give them your time, your energy, your attention. But they never ask how you are. They never pause to check in on your heart. And if you do try to open up, they change the subject, right back to themselves. At first, you tell yourself they're going through a tough time, that you're being a good friend. But after a while, you start to feel drained. Not just tired, but emotionally emptied out. As if you've been carrying their weight for so long, you forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. There's a difference between supporting someone and being used as a place to unload. One is rooted in love and balance. The other? It's imbalance disguised as friendship. And if someone can't be there for you, even in your hardest moments, then it's time to reconsider the role they play in your life. I remember a woman who shared her story with me. Let's call her Margaret. She spent years being the strong one in her circle. Whenever someone had a crisis, they called Margaret. When someone needed help moving, needed money, needed advice, they turned to her. But when Margaret's husband passed away and she needed someone to talk to, the phone never rang. The people she had held up for so long were suddenly silent. That's when Margaret realized she hadn't built friendships. She had built dependency. And the moment she could no longer give, the relationship faded. It was a painful awakening, but also a freeing one. Because from that day forward, Margaret stopped saying yes to everyone else and started saying yes to herself. And that brings us to something else that might sound familiar. Promises. Or more accurately, broken promises. Maybe you've been on the receiving end of one too many "I'll be there," only to find yourself sitting alone. Maybe you've waited for calls that never came, or planned meals that were canceled last minute without so much as an apology. It doesn't take many of those moments to start feeling like an afterthought in someone else's life. And while everyone makes mistakes now and then, there's a difference between occasional forgetfulness and a pattern of disregard. When someone constantly forgets their commitments to you, what they're really saying without using words is, "You're not important enough to remember." Think about how that feels. You clear your calendar, prepare your home, maybe even cook a meal. You show up, and they don't. Or they come late. Or they act as if it doesn't matter. Over time, this kind of treatment chips away at your self-worth. You start wondering if you're asking for too much, when in truth all you're asking for is respect. Respect doesn't require wealth or youth or status. It's free. And it should be the foundation of every relationship in your life. So if there's someone in your world who consistently breaks promises, forgets your time, or takes your presence for granted, it's okay to step back. It's okay to say, "My time matters, my feelings matter." Because they do. They always have. You've lived through enough by now to know what a meaningful relationship looks like. It's not perfect. It's not always easy. But it's mutual. It uplifts. It listens. It shows up. And here's something I truly hope you take to heart. Protecting your peace doesn't mean you're selfish. It means you're finally ready to live in alignment with the wisdom you've earned. It means honoring your journey, your boundaries, and your beautiful, irreplaceable spirit. We're not done yet. Let's keep going. Have you ever had the same conversation with someone over and over again about the same problem, the same pain, the same complaint, and nothing ever changes? You listen, you nod, maybe you offer a few kind words or even practical suggestions. But days, weeks, sometimes years later, you find yourself right back in the same conversation. Nothing has shifted, except maybe your patience. This isn't about being cold or lacking empathy. Quite the opposite. But if someone keeps coming to you with the same worries and never takes even the smallest step forward, you begin to feel like you're not helping anymore. You're just holding a space that never gets filled. At first, it feels generous to be that shoulder to lean on. But eventually, it starts to feel like quicksand. The more you stand still in their struggle, the more you feel yourself sinking too. And the hard truth is, not everyone wants to grow. Some people are more comfortable in their pain than in the effort it takes to heal. And if you try to carry that weight for them, you'll lose your balance. There's a quiet strength in knowing when to stop simply comforting and start being honest. I once told a friend gently, "I love you, but if you don't want to change your situation, I can't keep listening to you relive it." It was hard. She didn't take it well. But in time, she came back and thanked me, not for fixing her, but for finally being real with her. That's the kind of courage we build as we grow older. The courage to speak with compassion and clarity. Because kindness without truth can become enabling. And truth without kindness can become cruelty. But when we learn to hold both, that's when we start to truly help the people around us. And more importantly, ourselves. Now, let's talk about something that may feel a little closer to home than we'd like. Those people who can't stop talking about themselves. Not just occasionally, but constantly. The ones who fill every silence with stories about their past, what they achieved, who they knew, what they did decades ago. At first, it may feel charming, maybe even impressive. But over time, it becomes clear that they're clinging to those moments not just with pride, but with desperation. It's not the past that's the problem. It's the refusal to live in the present. When someone can only talk about who they were and never reflect on who they are now, it leaves the relationship stuck. There's no depth, no mutual exploration, no space for your voice. Just a one-sided show, again and again. I once had an acquaintance like that. Every meeting, he would recount the same stories about his awards, his former job title, the people he used to know. And while those stories were meaningful at first, eventually I realized something heartbreaking. He was telling them because he didn't believe he had anything left to offer now. But the truth is, your value doesn't expire with age. It doesn't disappear with retirement or dim with the passing of time. In fact, for many of us, our deepest wisdom, our quietest strength, and our richest contributions come later in life, when we've seen enough, felt enough, and grown enough to truly understand what matters. When someone can't stop boasting, it's often a mask for their insecurity. And when a relationship becomes all about one person's past glory, it stops being a shared space. That doesn't mean you stop caring for them, but it may mean stepping back, making space for conversations that nourish you too, because life is still happening now. Your days are still meaningful, and you deserve to spend your time with people who live in the present with you, not just those who relive the past in front of you. And now, after all this reflection, let's pause together. Think of everything we've explored, the subtle patterns, the heavy dynamics, the emotional toll of relationships that no longer serve your peace. It's not easy, is it? Letting go of people, especially those you've known for years, can feel like a small heartbreak. But sometimes, it's the kindest thing you can do for yourself and for them. Because choosing peace doesn't mean pushing people away in anger. It means honoring your boundaries. It means surrounding yourself with those who uplift, listen, grow, and love you for who you are now, not just who you were or what you gave. You've made it this far in life. You've weathered storms, carried burdens, loved deeply, and maybe even lost. You've given so much of yourself to others. Isn't it time to give that same care back to you? If any part of today's conversation resonated with you, even just a little, I want you to know something simple but powerful. You are not alone. There are so many others just like you who are quietly reassessing their lives, reclaiming their peace, learning that it's okay to say no, to create distance, to choose joy over obligation. And in that spirit, I invite you to share something in the comments below. Maybe a story, a realization, or just a word. Peacefulness. That one word can be a small promise to yourself and to the life you still want to create. If you found comfort or clarity here today, please give this video a like. It helps others find this message too. And if you'd like to continue growing with us, exploring wisdom, relationships, healing, and joy after 60, please subscribe and turn on the notifications. We'd be honored to have you with us. You deserve kindness. You deserve connection. And most of all, you deserve a life that feels light, grounded, and free. Here's to letting go of what no longer serves you and opening the door to everything that does. See you next time.